Hey,
Okay, we'll go ahead and get started then for the County of San Diego Citizens Law Enforcement Review Board meeting for today, Tuesday, December 7th, 2021. Again, I apologize for the delay in starting. We are adjusting to a new virtual platform and I was having some technical difficulties, but I thank you for your patience. I'd start off by asking Pastor Spriggs to call roll.
Yes. Susan Youngflesh,
Present.
Eileen Delaney,
Present.
Pastor Robert Spriggs Jr., I am present. Buki Domingos, Nadia Keen Ayub,
Present.
Bonnie Kink,
Here.
Marianne Pintar,
Present.
Tim Ware,
Here.
and G.I. Wilson.
Here.
That concludes roll call.
Thank you. Moving on to public comments. And I understand that we do have a different system, but Mr. Parker, if it's correct, I believe Ms.
Yeah.
Husband will be helping with
You know what?
transferring
Yes,
people over.
she was going to, but unfortunately I need her to work with Ms. Domingos, who's having some issues logging on. So Ms. Husband, if you could work with Ms. Domingos, and then I'll do my best to get the folks transferred over. And to the members of the public, please be patient with us as we work through this new platform. And let's see what happens here. So I'm going to try to, we'll have Karen Remus. Ms. Remus, are you there?
I am. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, and your 3 minutes to address the CLRB starts now.
Thank you. Good evening, CLRB members. My name is Karen Remus, and I was born and raised in San Diego County, South Bay, and currently reside in zip code 92131. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I'd like to commend Executive Officer Parker and CLRB members for your efforts to improve transparency and bring much needed reform to civilian oversight of San Diego County Sheriff's Department. During last month's meeting, Executive Officer Parker detailed the difficulty of proving racially biased policing on a case-by-case basis. Yet, the Campaign Zero report data attached to last month's agenda covers in stark detail the realities of this pervasive problem. Tonight, I am asking the Executive Officer to take action on and for the board to put on its agenda for a future meeting, a collaborative public brainstorming session to cover how best to address the racially discriminatory policing documented in the Campaign Zero report. While I recognize the Executive Officer and the board welcomed public comment on this topic last month, unfortunately, public comment alone does not allow for the type of collaborative dialogue needed to address a problem of this magnitude and importance. For example, when making public comment alone, it is difficult for members of the community to know whether any suggested actions to address this issue fall within the current powers of the CLRB. We need your guidance in this regard. For the CLRB to make inroads in addressing racially discriminatory policing, a true back and forth brainstorming session between community members and CLRB members is needed. This can be done as a CLRB special meeting or even as a designated agenda item at a regular meeting. Working together provides the best opportunity to try and find solutions for this critically important issue. I hope you will consider creating an opportunity for community members to dialogue with you and not just at you. Thank you for your attention and for your service to our county.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to Darwin Fishman. Dr. Fishman, are you there? Dr. Fishman?
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you. Yes, we can.
Thank you. I'm so glad you have a new system. Thank you, Darwin Fishman with the Racial Justice Coalition of San Diego and North County Equity and Justice Coalition. And I wanted to thank you for your work. I see the UT article. It's great to see that with your investigative work and your oversight, that there is improvement and it's showing, especially in terms of holding officers accountable that need to be held accountable that have either made mistakes or intentionally harmed people. That helps to really build community trust, and we very much appreciate that. I wanted to also comment on the COVID protocols. It's also, I've noticed the press coverage about the deaths and custodies you've had in the outbreak. And I want to see what CLRB is doing to help ensure the safety, security, especially in terms of COVID for inmates. And if that can either be agenda item or something that you guys cover formally, that would be great. And working with the Sheriff's Department in terms of the jails, we greatly appreciate it. Thank you again for your work, and I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thank you so very much, Dr. Fishman. Next, we're going to go to Shelley Lind. Let me see if I can get Ms. Lind over. Hold on one second, please. Shelley Lind, are you there?
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you. Your 3 minutes to address the CLRB starts now.
Yes, hi. Wait, let me turn this off. Hi there.
Hi.
My experience, I'm sorry, my phone. Okay. My experience is with my son.
Are you there, Shelley?
Hold on. Okay, can you hear me?
Okay, we can hear you, and we'll restart your time to now.
Thank you.
Okay? All right, go ahead.
My experiences with my son, he was picked up by the police and he was taken to jail. And he did not have his arraignment due to COVID. So within 4 days, he was transferred to George Bailey. During that time, my son, who's severely mentally ill and conserved in the county of San Diego for a grave disability, something that's very difficult to get, he had a wristband put on him that somehow indicated to other inmates that that he could be beat up. He was taken somewhere, he was badly beaten. He was thrown against the wall several times with his head. He told me he didn't fight because he was afraid for his life. When they were done, they contacted the guards. He was then taken to the hospital. I didn't know about any of this too much after he left jail. Think about that. The guards knew. Nobody was prosecuted. Nobody was charged with assault. My son went in there basically on a drug charge. That's not a big crime. He wasn't even charged. So he was in the hospital. After that, he was on medical for about a week. He has a crooked nose. He is conserved. The only way I found out was I contacted the medical at the George Bailey and said, is he on medication? And then they told me what had happened, just in bits and pieces. By the time my son got out a week later, they were going to release him to the street in the middle of the night with all the other people. A man who has no phone, no money, and is gravely disabled. I was expected to drive down there and camp out for hours, waiting for him, trying to find him in the dark. Luckily, I did contact behavioral health and they got him transferred to a psychiatric hospital where he could be safely picked up the next day. I contacted the jail. I contacted the DA and said what happened. Nothing, no response. Now, I don't understand how this is allowed in our country and in California. I just don't understand. He went in there. He was never charged with anything. He didn't even have a chance to be arraigned. He was there a week. He was badly beaten. And nothing, no answer, no accountability, no nothing. What have we become? I can only imagine if he was Black or Latino. You know, he doesn't have a voice. He's mentally ill. I'm his voice. And I'm not going away. So please, please continue to do what you do and hold them accountable. We don't treat people like this, not in this country. Thank you.
And thank you. Next, we will go to Lynn Owens. Lynn Owens, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
We can hear you, and your 3 minutes to address the clerk starts now.
Okay. Hello, club members. My name is Lynn Owens. I have lived in San Diego County for 43 years, and I currently live in zip code 92131. I want to thank CLURB for the increasing transparency you are bringing to the difficult job the Sheriff's Department does. Oh, I'm still reeling from the previous speaker. There's a lot of tough work to be done. CLURB focuses, I know, on researching complaints related to specific incidents, like the one we just heard. However, I understand that you are also asking for public input on how best to evaluate the Sheriff Department's success in avoiding racially biased policing. I spent 35 years in the software industry, and I'm very interested in data. The Sheriff's Department website shows a great deal of data collected, but I don't see much useful analysis, at least on this topic. On the other hand, Campaign Zero's report, included with last month's CLURB agenda, uses the Sheriff's Department's own RIPA data, but adds much more useful analysis. According to Campaign Zero, Black people were 130% more likely to be stopped, 21% more likely to be searched, and 47% more likely to have force used against them than white people during the years 2016 through 2018. Many other groups, such as people with disabilities and the mentally ill, were also adversely affected. Black citizens and many others reviewing these numbers are unlikely to feel safe as they live, work, and play in San Diego County. This is a very complex issue. A quick once-over will not solve it. However, many county citizens, including me, would gladly dive deeply with you in one or more special meetings or other venues. Reducing racially discriminatory policing is well worth the effort, along with, I would say, any kind of discriminatory policing. Thank you very much for your time and your work.
Thank you. Next, we will go to Yusuf Miller. Yusuf Miller, are you there?
Yes, I am. Thank you. My name is Yusuf Miller. I'm with the North County Equity and Justice Coalition, the Racial Justice Coalition of San Diego, and Activist San Diego. I want to thank you all on CLURB for your CLURB reform movements and moving in the right direction. We really need protocol review and reform. As the woman was just speaking earlier, the young lady about her son in jail being beat up, we can see all kinds of policy failure that has happened there. And there are many, many other incidents such as this. And we hope to come alongside her and her family as she tries to find answers to what's going on. Not only peace, reform, and mental health, which is a huge crisis, but reform in our protocols in the jails with drugs and people who are arrested on these minor cases and the harm that is done to them on these misdemeanor cases. Gender identity and the protocols that have to do with gender identity, where people were also beaten within an inch of their life. These protocols really need to be looked at and reformed. The in-custody deaths, of course, that's being reviewed now, but we see an increase in deaths when it comes to COVID-19 here recently. We see every time we open the paper, every time we turn on the news, there's something concerning in the Sheriff's Department, and we need to make movements towards correcting these. So I want to congratulate CLURB on the movement that we're making towards this end, but the work is not done. We will be here with you and supporting you. Please, let's work on this together. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we will move to Tom Packard. Mr. Packard, are you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
We can. Your time starts now, sir.
Yeah. Actually, I think this is good timing from my point of view. I think what I'm going to say, I hope will build a little bit on what Lynn Owens and Yusuf Miller just said. My name's Tom Packard. I'm a member of the Showing Up for Racial Justice North County. Thank you for the discussion at your last meeting regarding racial discrimination and related training. In response to your questions, Sheriff staff and Attachment D offered brief information on training that deputies receive regarding racial profiling and discrimination. I noticed that they receive only 2 hours of training on cultural diversity and ethnic diversity. A racial profiling refresher is offered every 5 years, but has suspended the requirement for follow-up facilitation with a certified instructor. I couldn't easily find detail on other subjects such as stigma and bias. I found in the Sheriff's 2020 annual report only a half a page each on de-escalation and diversity and inclusion in a 55-page report. These issues aren't mentioned at all in the 2021 department goals. Given the limited attention that these issues seem to be receiving from department leadership, I encourage CLERB to ask the sheriff what priority these issues have for him and the department, and specifically what results have been achieved in addressing them. There's an axiom that says what gets measured gets done. In that vein, please ask the sheriff what data the department used to guide its priorities and the supervision and oversight of staff from the executive level down through the ranks. Are REPA and/or Campaign Zero data used at all? If not, what data sources does the sheriff actually use to guide strategies to address racial disparities? Thank you for your attention.
And thank you. Next, we'll go to Mary Best. Mary Best, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, and your 3 minutes to address the clerk starts now.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Mary Best. I'm a therapist and member of the Racial Justice Coalition San Diego. I want to extend a sincere thanks to your leadership, Paul Parker, and you members of CLERB for your sustained commitment and efforts to bring transparency and accountability to the Sheriff's Department. Your work is and will literally save lives. CLERB's recent finding in the Alvarez case is a clear example among many of transparency gaps in the department and their refusal to publicly acknowledge actions by their staff that continue to result in deaths in custody. It really confirms the critical importance of immediate access to information in order to assure oversight and review of all cases in which there's been a death or injury. That the department waited 4 months after the death of Mr. Alvarez again speaks to a lack of transparency to reveal results of an internal investigation. That the department declined to affirm or refute the veracity of CLERB's findings is disturbing in their lack of accountability for the negligence and the very likely preventable death of Mr. Alvarez. I support your efforts to ensure that hourly checks include proof of life, a no-brainer, and that cameras are operable in all cells, not waiting until a new facility like Rock Mountain is completed. A larger and more urgent question is, why are we spending millions for yet another detention facility when the current and correct focus is shifting away from detaining those whose crime may be their mental health or substance abuse issues, and to funding, the shift is to funding for treatment and humane care of those whose crimes is their suffering around these conditions. Thank you so much again for your service, truly, in this critical time of change and forward movement for the safety of our community. A very genuine and heartfelt thanks, and a very safe holiday to all of you.
And thank you. I have 2 more requests to speak, although I do not see either requester as an attendee, Debbie Kamens and Natalie Nachette. Let me just double check to make sure I'm not missing them. And I don't believe that I am. So with that, Chair Youngflesh, I will turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Parker. I'll move on to agenda item number 3, which is minutes approval. Do any board members have any revisions to the minutes from our last meeting? Okay, hearing and seeing none. I would ask for a motion to, are you moving, Mr. Wilson?
Yes,
To
yes,
approve the minutes as written?
yes.
And is there a second? Seconded by Vice Chair Delaney. And then Tamika, if you can call roll.
Board Chair Susan Youngquist,
Yes.
Vice Chair Eileen Delaney,
Yes.
Pastor Robert Spriggs Jr.,
Yes.
Buki Domingos,
Yes.
Nadia Keen Ayub,
Yes.
Bonnie Kink,
Yes.
Marianne Pintar,
Yes.
Tim Ware,
Abstain. I was not present.
and G.I. Wilson.
Yes.
Thank you.
Motion carries with 1 abstention. Moving on to agenda item number 4 is presentation training. There is none listed. So agenda item number 5, executive officers report, and I'll turn it back to you, Mr. Parker.
Thank you, Chair Youngflesh. As far as the executive officer report goes, on November 12th of this year, I met with the San Diegans for Justice. They're still in the process of researching CLRB and trying to find a way to make CLRB stronger and, in their words, more relevant and pertinent at this time. On December 1st, new CLRB members, Buki Domingos, Nadia Keen Ayub, and Marianne Pintar, along with CLRB staff, investigators Ellen Bohan, Brianna Chiesa, Supervising Special Investigator Lynn Setzler, and Investigator Claudia Wigfall, attended a CLRB overview provided by Senior Deputy County Counsel Sherry Hoffman. The training topics included the County Code, Administrative Code, CLRB Rules and Regulations, and the Brown Act. And thank you very much, Ms. Hoffman, for the training. It was most insightful. I learned quite a bit myself. On December 2nd, I was interviewed by iNewsSource.com about CLRB's investigation into the death of Mark Armendo, which was CLRB case 20-096. Yesterday, I provided a quote to the San Diego Union Tribune about CLRB case number 20-113, Mr. Alvarez, the death case that's on tonight's agenda. I meet with Analytica Consulting personnel once a week to receive an update on their in-custody death data project that they're doing for CLRB, and we anticipate that final project report in March of 2022. The California State Auditor's audit of CLRB continues and is scheduled to be completed in the first quarter of 2022. A job offer was extended to a special investigator candidate, and it was accepted. The candidate's in the background process, and if successfully completes the background, we're hopeful the candidate will start in January, right after the first of the year, we're anticipating. I discussed the existing District 1 CLRB member vacancy with D1 or District 1 personnel. We're hopeful that candidates will be identified for interviews in the near future. Chair Youngflesh's term has expired and interviews are in the process for a new District 2 CLRB member. Chair Youngflesh has graciously continued, said she will continue to serve until a replacement is appointed. And I can tell you that that's a huge loss for CLRB. And the District 3 CLRB member vacancy should be filled soon. In reference to the investigative workload and classification report for November of 2021, which is attachment B, there were 6 new cases as compared to 8 from last November. At the end of November, there were 119 cases for the calendar year. There were 116 in all of calendar year 2020. There are 9 cases on tonight's agenda, one of which is a death case. At the end of November, there were 76 active cases, and for the first time in recent memory, none of them were in lodged-only status. All 76 were open and active with signed complaints, or were cases without the need for a signed complaint. At the end of November, there were 26 open death cases. We had documents for 13, awaiting documents on the other 13. As I said, one's on tonight's agenda. And then in November, there were 3 new Sheriff's Department in custody related death cases in November, as I said. At the end of November, there were 12 open uses of force resulting in great bodily injury without a complaint. There were 2 open discharges of firearm without a complaint, and 1 use of force at a protest or First Amendment protected event without a complaint. As far as attachment C goes, which is the clerk reports by due date and clerk reports due by case number, there's only 1 case scheduled to reach its 1-year time limitation by the end of the year, and it is on tonight's agenda. It's case number 20-116. I'm going to keep emphasizing that the investigators, we are finally at the point where we're prioritizing cases correctly, meaning death cases first, excessive force, other case types that we process without a signed complaint, uses of force at protest, the use of force resulting in great bodily injury, discharge of firearm. We're also prioritizing excessive force cases, cases in which that are high priority or high profile, and then also in which evidence would tend to go away sooner rather than later. So that, as I'm hopeful the public sees and that the board members see and the media sees, that we are at that point where we're finally getting to where we need to be as far as that prioritization and timely completion for the most part. We still have a couple of those cases that are lagging, but we're moving forward and in a better shape than we've been in a long time. As far as my full my correspondence to the full clerk, I sent 4 media article compilations containing a total of 27 articles. And then I sent a response from the San Diego Sheriff's Department Sergeant Brayman to the clerk member inquiries made at the November meeting. I sent that, and that was referenced in public comment already. There are still 4 policy recommendations pending a response, 3 from the Sheriff's Department, 1 from probation. We did get a response for the discontinuation of the standard practice of dealing in custody death cases. The Sheriff's Department implemented this change internally in April and recently updated their 2021 homicide manual to reflect the change and have publicized that change just recently. So thank you very much for the Sheriff's Department for making that much needed change. That should go a long way to increasing transparency in the community. So thank you. We have no sustained findings pending response and none that we have to report out on. So with that, Chair Youngflesh, that concludes my executive officer report.
Thank you, Mr. Parker. For board chair report, I don't have anything to add except to wish everyone a happy holidays and thank the staff for their work, and additionally the liaisons who are here tonight for their work as well. So I will move on to a new business, which is agenda item number 7. And Mr. Parker, would you like to address the continuance of teleconferencing?
Yes, I can. I'm going to need some help from County Council, because this is that item where the board makes a motion to continue teleconferencing in the presence of a declared state of emergency by the county's public health officer, which still exists. Ms. Hoffman, if I may, there seems to be some confusion. I've had some feedback from on a phone call earlier today. This must be done within 30 days. Is that correct, ma'am? As far as if the board chooses to move forward with a virtual meeting, the main thing that needs to be done is they have to vote on that within 30 days of the meeting. Is that correct? Or correct me if I'm wrong.
That's correct. It needs to be done every 30 days. If the board does not meet every 30 days, for example, I think CLRB's next board meeting will not be within 30 days from today. CLRB could hold a special meeting to make this finding within 30 days. An alternative would be to authorize the chair to consider the conditions within 30 days and memorialize that finding in writing, and then have CLRB ratify that at its next board meeting.
So if I understand you correctly, Ms. Hoffman, I can make the decision within 30 days. And then if I write that, memorialize it, I assume in some sort of written response, either a letter or an email to Mr. Parker, then we can continue to have the next meeting virtually outside of the 30-day timeframe.
Correct. Ideally, CLRB would hold a special meeting for the entire board to make that finding. But if that's not feasible, then that's an alternative.
What would make it not feasible? Is there requirements that are written as to what feasibility is?
The law requires that the board make that finding.
Okay. So there's no specifics. It would require the board itself to then have the special meeting is what I'm hearing.
Correct.
So our alternatives are either to have the meeting moved up again, which would then probably put us in the same quandary the following month, or to hold a special meeting and extend it for the normal date outside of the 30 days.
Or have an in-person meeting.
Or resume in person, correct?
Correct. And I'm sorry, Vice Chair Delaney, you have a question?
Did I understand you though, Ms. Hoffman, that she could make that determination and that at our next meeting, we could ratify that without having a special meeting?
Yeah, so that's not a provision that's provided for in the law. But that could be an alternative if a special meeting or an in-person meeting is not feasible. So that's not the ideal approach.
And so also, just so I clarify for myself, it has to be within 30 days or it has to be at least 30 days?
Within 30 days.
Okay. Thank you.
So I think it'd be appropriate to hear from other board members if they have a preference to go back to in-person or to continue virtually. My understanding from prior feedback is that virtual attendance is preferred at this point in time. So I would actually work under that premise. If anyone disagrees with that, then please, let me know at this time.
Chair Youngflesh, may I just jump in before the board
Sure.
members comment? Just to be very clear, if the board chooses to do in-person meetings, we're also going to have the virtual capability set up for all of our in-person meetings from this point forward. So that we'll have the meeting in person, but we're also going to be broadcasting it live virtually. Just if there are any concerns about public attendance dropping with, because of the going back in person.
Great. Thank you for that reminder, Mr. Parker. Ms. Pintar and then Ms. King.
He answered my question. I was going to just address the issue of, I think the community attendance seems to be increased with the virtual option. If I'm understanding County Council correctly, is it possible that we just log in next week at our regular meeting time and vote to have a virtual meeting? No, because it's not noticed.
Yeah, right. You would have to have it noticed. This special meeting took place of our regular meeting. Even our regular meetings have to be noticed. So I mean, I guess technically we could have a meeting, but it would be a special meeting on the next week. We'd still have to notice it as such.
So there is not an option to make this call at any time between now and the next meeting. We just need to make the decision about whether we're going to have a special meeting or meet in person. Is that correct? Those are the options?
No. So my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Hoffman, is that the law requires you have it within 30 days, the next meeting. So say today we want to have the next meeting virtually, that meeting has to occur within 30 days of today. So the idea is if we want to go back to our normal meeting time, which is outside of the 30 days in the future, we'll call a special meeting sometime in the next 30 days for that, just to agendize and discuss and approve the regular meeting date as it stands right now. Unless we decide we want to go back to just being in person, and then we don't have to go through that process. Does that make sense to you?
Chair Youngflesh, I think that was right, but I didn't completely follow. So if I can restate.
Sure, go ahead.
And just make sure everyone's on the same page. So in order for CLRB to continue to meet via teleconference, a finding has to be made by CLRB within 30 days, so every 30 days, that the state of emergency still exists and state and local officials are continuing to recommend social distancing. So your next meeting could be at the regular time, or if it's going to be a special meeting, it's just that that finding has to be made within 30 days. So a special meeting could be called for next week or anytime within the 30 days, just to make that finding to continue the teleconferencing.
That was what I was trying to say. I didn't articulate it very well.
And one clarification, I think this is probably obvious, but if CLRB were to resume in-person meetings, that would not preclude the use of teleconferencing for public comment.
Correct. Thank you, Ms. Hoffman. And So I believe your questions are answered, Ms. Pintar, then?
Yes, I was trying to suggest that we call a special meeting for next week in order to take action to have the virtual meeting the following month.
Got it. I understand what you're suggesting. Ms. Kank?
Well, I don't know that this even matters, but my vote is to have in-person meetings. I think it's important to meet face-to-face instead of online, but that's just my personal preference.
Okay. And Ms. Domingos?
I agree with Ms. Kink, but I would like to suggest that we take into account that we still have COVID and exposure issues. So just have like an amendment to meeting in person where if one of the club members were to test positive, that person could attend the in-person meeting virtually, and that will count for attendance.
And Ms. Hoffman, I'd have to verify with you if that's acceptable.
I will need to look at the law and double check that.
Okay, thank you. And I don't see anyone else's hand up. So it sounds like the majority would still like to meet virtually, as the only person who have expressed interest in going in person, well, two people, Ms. Domingos and Ms. Kink.
Susan,
Sorry, Vice Chair Delaney.
Yeah, I had my hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's like the Brady Bunch. It's hard to see everybody sometimes.
It is. It's typical. Would
Please
you like
go
me to?
ahead.
Okay, I just didn't want to interrupt. I'd like to, rather than having a special meeting, I'd like to just go ahead and have our chair make the finding for us and then just ratify it at our next meeting. I think it makes it easier, especially with the holidays and everything going on. And that would be to have a virtual meeting. I don't know if we need a motion for that or not, but.
Well, it sounded like, and I see Mr. Wilson has his hand up as well, but it sounded like Ms. Hoffman said that wasn't ideal. So from her response, I'm not sure if that's truly acceptable or not. But would you like to chime in?
Yeah,
Counselor?
Chair Young, as a lawyer, you'll know it depends.
I do. That's why I'm being a little leery of that as well.
It's not an explicit option under AB 361.
Right. So the safest
I
thing would
recommend
be
that that be a last resort.
Okay.
Mr. Wilson?
I'm in favor of continuing the virtual meetings.
Okay. So my suggestion would be that we agendize a special meeting just to, within the 30 days, to vote on continuing the teleconferencing based on the feedback that I've received today. Can we go ahead and do that, Mr. Parker, or would we need a motion for this? Oh, Ms. Kank, I'm sorry.
I don't know if we're going to do this next week, there's going to be 3 of us at a conference. So
right. And I don't think that we've decided on a date, but I'm glad you brought that to my attention. I think it just needs to be within the next 30 days.
Okay.
And as long as we have a quorum, then we can go ahead and pass that, if that's decided. Mr. Parker, can we then go ahead and set a special meeting agenda up to be agendized in the next 30 days, or do we need to have a motion at this time to do that?
Well, without stepping on Ms. Hoffman's toes, I think it's very clear that you folks, that's what you're wanting. So that's what we'll go ahead and do. I do see that Vice Chair Delaney still has her hand up. I'm not certain if she wants to say something new or if we're good.
Thanks, Mr. Parker. I just have one more question. I'm trying to make sense of this. If we're doing it, it has to be within 30 days. Does that mean you could literally vote on something a week before the meeting to make it virtual? I'm unclear about that, and I'm sorry, I'm not trying to make such a big deal about this, but it's not making sense to me.
And I don't want to step on Ms. Hoffman's toes, but that would be my understanding as well, is within 30 days of today. So we could have a meeting on the 30th day from today And then as long as we gave proper notice under the law of the regular meeting of the next clerk board meeting, then we can have that set. So yes, would be the
Okay.
answer to your question
Okay.
was.
Thank you.
And Chair Young Flesh, just to clarify, clerk will need to make a finding today and then again within the 30 days. So I just don't want you to.
Okay, so we would have to make the finding today and then have another special meeting to have the finding again.
Correct, because today would be the start of the 30 days.
Okay, then do I hear a motion to continue the teleconferencing meeting option pursuant to Government Code Section 54953 subdivision E? Moved by Mr. Wilson. Is there a second? Seconded by Vice Chair Delaney, and I would ask Ms. Husband to call roll.
Board Chair Susan Youngflesh,
Yes.
Vice Chair Eileen Delaney,
Yes.
Pastor Robert Spriggs Jr.,
Yes.
Buki Domingos,
Yes.
Nadia Keen Ayub,
Yes.
Bonnie Kink,
Yes.
Marianne Pintar,
Yes.
Tim Ware,
Yes.
and T.I. Wilson.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries unanimously. And then I will work with you, Mr. Parker, to come up with a new date so we can set the special meeting.
Thank you.
Moving on to agenda item number 8, unfinished business. Subsection A, update, authority for executive officer to work with county staff to pursue legislation and or to add a policy to the county legislative program in support of increased transparency and civilian oversight of peace officers and custodial officers. And I would turn this over to you, Mr. Parker, to address. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Youngflesh. The Board of Supervisors met today to discuss the 2022 legislative program. I don't know what the end result of that is. However, my understanding is that that's the first thing that needs to happen for them to approve that. And then once they approve that, then we can get the ball rolling to pursue those legislative changes, which will take some time. But I know that today was the first step. I don't have the update as to whether or not that went through. It does, I'm getting an update right now. It was approved. So that's the first step out of the way. And so I will continue to keep the board up to date as we move through this very tedious process from this point forward. But that's where you are for the update, Chair Youngflesh.
Thank you for the update and for your continuing to pursue this. I know it's important to us in the public. Moving forward, 8B, update again. And without going through the whole title, I would again turn it over to you, Mr. Parker.
And again, there's not much more to say other than kind of what I said last month, but I want to make sure that we address it every month, that this too is moving forward. We're going to be working with Labor Relations, Human Resources County Council to make this happen. But the first thing that needs to happen is the Board of Supervisors needs to approve this suggested change, the expansion. I don't have a timeline on when that's going to occur, but once I know that, once I'm updated on that, we'll make sure that you folks are aware of it as well. So that's really, on that point, really no update at this time.
And then I'm also looking for an update in the in-custody death data review subcommittee.
Right, thank you, ma'am. That I kind of touched on in the executive officer report. I meet with Analytica Consulting every week to discuss their progress. And at this point, they are culling data from other counties in California. They are looking at the reports that already exist out there on death data, the publications that have happened about San Diego's detention facility ranking and whatnot. They're looking at that. And again, at this point, March of 2022 is when we expect their final report. They're going to give us a report back on December 20th, the first report back. The next report back is due in January, and then the final report that we'll bring before the clerk is due at the end of March. So we're on point. I'm excited to see what they come up with. They seem like they have a firm grasp on what's going on and the data that's required. Back to you,
Thank
Chair.
you. And I see that Mr. Ware has his hand up. Is
Yes,
there-
thank you, Chair Yanfles. I wasn't quick enough to ask my question after Mr. Parker gave his executive officer's report. So I don't know if we can go back to, I just have a question about his report.
I think that's fair.
You mentioned the piece with the sealing of the death cases for the sheriff. Is that not necessary also, that request for probation as well? Do you not have that process?
No, at this point, normally the investigating agency into the death is who makes that request. And probation folks can jump in here, but if something were to happen in relation to a probation officer, a death in their custody, it's an outside agency that would be doing that criminal investigation. For example, there was a death that occurred a couple of months ago in the juvenile detention facility, and the sheriff's department is the lead investigatory agency for that death case. So that's how come we only focused it on the sheriff's department and did not ask probation on that one. Now, the other policy recommendation, we did ask probation to consider us responding to their death scenes. But for the sealing, we stuck just with the sheriff.
Great, that answers my follow-up question. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm moving on to board member comments, agenda item number 9, and I would call in any board members for any comment at this time. Mr. Wilson?
Yes, I would like to thank Mr. Parker for lecturing my class on death investigations. I don't want to seem like I'm being overly laudatory, but it was literally the best college lecture on death investigations that I have ever sat in. It was extraordinary. And thank you, Mr. Parker. My students were just overwhelmed by it.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. And I'm not sure who was first, so please don't be offended if you weren't, but I'll call on Ms. Pintar and then Mr. Ware.
Thank you. I wanted to thank the CLERB staff and County Council for the briefing that we received last week. It was very helpful. And I also wanted to address a couple of the comments that came during public comment, if this is the appropriate time to do that.
Yes, as long as, again, I have to caution you that we can't talk about cases specifically.
Correct.
And generally, board member comments is general, but I understand that you'd like to address them, so that's fine.
I wasn't sure when else it would be appropriate to ask for something to be agendized for the next meeting. So if you'd prefer for me to wait for another time, I will.
Oh, no, you can go ahead. I wasn't sure where you were headed with that. That's why I just
Well,
wanted-
No, I appreciate it. A couple of people referenced the article in the Union Tribune on December 3rd about the COVID outbreaks in the jails. That the article stated that 125 inmates tested positive for COVID and 2 deaths were likely caused by COVID infection. You might recall that last month I asked the sheriff's liaison about the low vaccination rate in the county jails. According to their data, 75% of the inmates have declined the vaccine, which is extremely high number compared to the general population. Their response at that meeting was that the vaccine is offered at intake and inmates are provided a fact sheet. Then, as was mentioned by Mr. Parker, last week the sheriff sent an email with further information saying that when vaccinations first became available, many refused them due to the vaccines being new. And currently inmates fill out a waiver asking why they don't want the vaccine and that most leave it blank. So I'd like to ask that we add to next month's agenda a training from the Sheriff's Department on the intake process and how the vaccine is offered at that time. It seems to me that people being booked into county jail are not likely to be receptive to anything at that time, at the time of intake. Many may be under the influence or in the middle of a mental health crisis, or they've been arrested after some sort of a dispute. That's just my layperson's opinion. That's why I'm asking to learn more about it. Additionally, I'd like to ask the CLERB staff to ask the county's health department for their assessment and recommendations for increasing the vaccination rate in the county jails. I don't know the extent of the county health department's involvement at this time, but they've done a really good job at getting our county residents vaccinated through public information and public vaccine clinics. And I think just making that one-time offer of a vaccine at the time of intake probably isn't going to do the trick. So I'd like to get this information, and then perhaps there's a policy recommendation we can make once we have it.
Okay, thank you for your comments. I understand that you've relayed some of this to Mr. Parker already, so I believe that we'll be discussing the agenda item further. And so you're aware, and I think you might be made aware of this already, but if you have any questions between the meetings, you can also reach out to Mr. Parker, and he's a great resource to assist and help throughout this. Were you done with your comments?
Yes.
Okay, then I'll move on to Mr. Ware, and then I see Ms. Domingos.
Thank you. I have no further comment. Thank you.
Okay,
Is my hand still up?
it's not, but I remember it was, so I didn't want to forget about you. Ms. Domingos? Oh, I'm sorry, before you start, Mr. Parker's hand is up, and I'm not sure if he would like to address something that Ms. Pintar said.
I would. I will put on next month's agenda the report back from my research, any conversations I have with county health staff in reference to Ms. Pintar's concerns. And then I can, I know the Sheriff's Department is here, but I can verify with them to see if they can get some kind of training for that inmate process about specifically as it pertains to vaccinations and whatnot on the agenda for January.
Thank you, Mr. Parker. Ms. Domingos.
I just have a question and a comment to Ms. Pintar's comment. I just, because we're such a diverse community, I do want to, I don't know if it's something I can say here, but I do want to say it in public because her comment was just made in public. So there was the great suggestion about the COVID vaccination, but also words were used like, we don't know if the inmates are under the influence. And so stuff like that, I would encourage us not to make assumptions. And if we do want to talk about the COVID vaccination and issues, we should just address that. Because that's just, in my opinion, perpetuating the biases and the status quo. What I did want to ask was, so it's okay to reach out to Mr. Parker regarding proposed agenda items for next meeting. That doesn't have to be done here, correct?
If you're looking to agendize something, or if you have a general question, then of course you can reach out to Mr. Parker in between meetings.
To have it on the agenda for January.
Yes, it doesn't mean it'll necessarily make it on the agenda because that's something that is sort of reviewed internally. But if you would like to put something on agenda or if you have a suggestion, then yes, you can reach out to him at any time with suggestions.
Yeah, because I have that item that was taken off the agenda and I'd like to have it back on the agenda. That's what I was asking.
Yeah, I would suggest reaching out to, maybe Mr. Parker would like to address this too, because I see his hand is up.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm so sorry to keep interrupting, but normally the process that we've had established is in an open forum like this, if you'd like to mention, like Ms. Pintar just did, about something that should be on next month's agenda, that's wonderful because the board chair is here and whatnot. If it comes afterwards, that's fine too. The only thing to keep in mind is if a board member reaches out to me and wants something on the agenda, I am going to clear that with the board chair. So just so you know that that's the internal process. So when Chair Youngflesh says it's an internal decision, that's ultimately the decision. It goes from me to the board chair, who ultimately determines if that remains on the agenda or not, as opposed to mentioning it right here, right now, so that the discussion can be made as far as having it on the agenda. That's just my clarification. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Parker. Ms. Domingos, is there anything you'd like to add?
No, as requested, I would like the item that was taken off the agenda pending my training to be put back on the January agenda.
Can you restate what that item is specifically?
I don't remember the words verbatim, but I had received a call from you pending training to take the item off the agenda and then for further to possibly put that back on the agenda.
Right, and I don't want to misstate what you want on the agenda, so I would ask for follow-up as to what specifically that is, because again, I don't want to put words in your mouth as to what you're looking for. So when you have that information, maybe you can then touch base with Mr. Parker again. He can relay that to me. Mr. Ware.
Yes, I don't know about from the forum if that was appropriate for the forum. But I think the information, the comments that Ms. Pintar made, I think were very, very appropriate and very relevant in that situation. And I think it can help from a percentage standpoint and those inmates being receiving the COVID inoculation. So I think it was very appropriate and very relevant. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ware. Mr. Parker, your hand is still up. Did you have another comment?
I have the verbiage for the next month's agenda if you'd like to discuss that, if Ms. Domingos is okay with that.
Sure.
For the agenda item. And Ms. Domingos, just correct me if I'm wrong. Actually, I had it, now it went away. It was, just bear with me, I apologize.
Okay.
It was accountability of sworn members for in-custody deaths. That is what I recall. Accountability of sworn members, Sheriff's Department members for in-custody deaths. It was a general conversation about that topic.
And Ms. Domingos, how did you picture this occurring? Because I realize it's not agendized tonight, but just so I have an understanding of what you're looking for, because accountability is a rather broad term.
Yeah, I can write up what it is and that is why I cautiously said it's okay for it to be on the agenda for January because it was taken off this agenda. So I can write a proposal or whatever you need me to write, stating what my thoughts are regarding accountability. I'm also aware that if stuff is not agendized, it cannot be discussed. But since you asked, what prompted that actually was a case, and I'm not going to mention the name, where the nurse was
We
charged
can't
with.
talk about the facts because that would inference
Yeah,
it.
so
But if you
that's-
can let me
that's
know,
the
like,
topic.
because so I can narrow the topic, because again, accountability is rather broad.
I will send you that email, definitely.
Okay. And Mr. Wilson, your hand was up, I believe. It's not anymore. Did I miss something? Was it not up?
I concur with Mr. Ware. He stole my thunder.
I understand. Thank you. If there are any other board member comments? No, then thank you for that discussion. I will move on to agenda item number 10, Sheriff Probation Liaison Query.
I'm sorry.
Oh, Pastor Spriggs, well, I can't see you, so was your hand up? Is there something you'd like to add?
Yeah, there's something wrong with the system, and that's why you can't see me on tonight.
Oh, well, that's unfortunate. I always like to see you. So hopefully they can remedy that for the next meeting.
Okay.
Do you have a comment to make other than the
No,
system?
that was it.
Okay.
Yep. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Moving on to agenda item number 10, Sheriff Probation Liaison Query. Do any board members have any questions of a general nature for the sheriff or probation liaisons? Mr. Parker, was any questions communicated to you ahead of this meeting that you would desire to share or would be required to share?
No, I will just, without putting on the spot, I'll just ask Ms. Pintar if she had any further comments or questions for the board, for the liaisons during this time.
Well, her hand is up, so I don't think you're
Oh,
putting.
there it is.
Spot.
All
So
right.
thank you, Ms. Pintar. Go ahead.
I appreciate it. Again, I'm referencing the article that Mr. Parker circulated to the board on that was in the San Diego Union Tribune on December 3rd. And in that, I believe the sheriff's department said that the camera was inoperable in the cell. I think that was the Lazaro case that was referenced in the article, correct? If I'm not mistaken. And I just wanted to, the sheriff's department said that they were looking at a new updated software system in the article to fix the problem of inoperable cameras, but they didn't have a timeline for when those cameras could be fixed. And I would just like to request that the sheriff's department report back to us with an inventory of inoperable cameras in the existing facilities and a more specific timeline for when the system-wide upgrade that they referenced in the article would be completed. And I'd ask that report tell us what's needed to fix the system. I don't know if it's resources. Do they need to go to the County Board of Supervisors. I'd just like to have a status report on the cameras.
And I'm not sure if there's a probation liaison here that could possibly address Ms. Pintar's query at this time, or at least a timeline as to if that's possible and when that would be possible. Okay, I'm not hearing from anybody. I'm not sure if there's a technical difficulty or not. Oh,
Chair Youngflesh, she indicated that was for the Sheriff's Department, not probation.
oh, I apologize. Thank you. And I did see Sergeant Brayman for 1 minute, and so hopefully she'll.
Yes, I'm on. Good evening. We can certainly look into that. The inventory of the inoperable cameras, I'm not sure we can actually divulge that to the public for security concerns, but we can certainly look into a report of what Ms. Pintar is asking.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Wilson?
Yeah, I'd like to add to Ms. Pintar's comments. In my time on the board, we've had several issues and problems with the cameras. So I would be interested in understanding what the sheriff's maintenance cycle is. Are the cameras inspected? And if there's a short-term immediate solution as opposed to the long-term solution of rehabbing and using another facility, because it keeps popping up.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Vice Chair Delaney.
Wondering if this is something that we could look at when the detention facilities inspections take place. Yeah.
I mean, I think that's definitely something to be looked at, although with the timeline, I'm not sure if the board members sound like if we can have those answers sooner than later, that might be beneficial.
We might be able to get a little bit more information though through those inspections. I believe they're supposed to take place, at the end of January? I can't remember exactly.
They're supposed to take place that was ideally, that's what it was going to be, around January 1st, and then we knocked it back to first quarter of 2022, just because of everything else that we have going on. So I will say that obviously it's something that for each facility we go to, since it's something that the board is saying is an issue, and you know that we've had concerns raised about this issue in the year that I've been here, and now it's coming up again. That's something that we'll look at as well during our inspections at every facility.
Thank you, Mr. Parker. Are there any other sheriff probation liaison queries? Okay, seeing and hearing none, then I would ask that council read us into closed session.
Pursuant to Government Code Section 54957, this board will now convene into closed session to consider item 11 on tonight's agenda.
Okay, thank you and happy holidays.